Erika Kirk was Charlie Kirk's handler, probably installed by Israel. I'm not sure, but probably it makes sense. All these Egyptian jets were following her around. I think it was 71 locations.
Erika Kirk has removed the wedding photo of her and Charlie Kirk from Charlie's office. What is happening over there?
So Kanye West just hinted at something that could seriously change how people look at Charlie Kirk's relationship with Erika. According to him, Charlie wasn't just unhappy, he allegedly felt stuck, like there was no easy way out. And what makes this even more intense is that Kanye and Charlie go way back, way before Erika was ever in the picture. So when things reportedly started going downhill, Charlie didn't just stay quiet. He allegedly reached out to someone he trusted, someone who already knew him on a deeper level, and that was Kanye. Now this is where things start to feel a lot heavier, because everything Kanye is now allegedly sharing lines up almost perfectly with what Candace Owens has been saying this whole time. It's starting to look like people close to Charlie may have already seen warning signs early on, and that raises a serious question. If Charlie really felt that trapped, would things have turned out differently if he had found a way to step away sooner? And here's the part that really has people paying attention. Kanye has had moments in the past where people didn't take him seriously, brushing off what he said as just noise. But this time feels different, because what he's saying about Charlie and Erika doesn't sound random or scattered. It sounds like something that connects, something that fits into a bigger picture.
What you're looking at is a picture of Charlie Kirk, Candace Owens, and Kanye West in 2018. Now, I'm not gonna lie to you, bro. This has to be like, this picture will go down in history books maybe 20, 30 years from now. This is like seeing Winston Churchill, Franklin D. Roosevelt, like the other guy that I can't say his name. This is just one of the weirdest pictures I've seen. Why is Kanye with Charlie Kirk and Candace Owens? I do not know.
People are now starting to notice more and more. It started lining up almost too perfectly with whispers that had already been circulating for a while. And those whispers painted a very different picture behind the scenes. One where Charlie wasn't just dealing with normal relationship stress, but was allegedly deeply unhappy in private, way more than people ever saw publicly. Some people even began quietly suggesting that he might have been thinking about divorce, not just in passing, but seriously considering an exit. And it didn't stop there. There were even claims floating around that he may have already started making big moves, like removing Erika from his will and looking into how he could secure full custody of his kids. At the time, that sounded extreme, almost unbelievable. But once Kanye came out and echoed a similar kind of narrative, suddenly those rumors didn't feel so easy to brush off anymore. Of course, in the beginning, a lot of people still dismissed everything. They assumed it was just another moment that would grab attention and then fade away like usual. But then something resurfaced that made everyone stop and really think.
For example, Erika had insisted she'd never seriously dated anyone before Charlie.
When I lived out here, I was here for 5 years. I never dated here because I saw vicariously through my roommate how terrible it was. Somehow getting drinks was the replacement of having coffee and breakfast. I personally would rather have coffee or brunch with someone than go. I don't drink. I find it unproductive, not because I'm holier than whatever. I just don't operate that way. But I always thought it was very strange how she would go to drinks with one guy and then go to dinner with another. So it goes twofold here.
An old photo from 2018 showing Kanye, Charlie, and Candace Owens together. And just like that, the entire conversation shifted. Because that image reminded people of something important. These weren't strangers speaking from a distance. They had actually been in the same circles for years. And once that clicked, the idea that Charlie might have opened up to Kanye suddenly didn't feel far-fetched at all. It started to feel possible, even likely to some people watching closely. And when you zoom out, the idea that Charlie may have felt stuck in that relationship starts to hit differently, because piece by piece, people began pointing out details that didn't fully line up. There were claims that certain things Erika had said about her past didn't match what later surfaced publicly. And that kind of gap, that can shake the foundation of any relationship fast. For example, Erika had reportedly presented herself as someone who hadn't seriously dated before Charlie, but then photos and clips started circulating that suggested she had previous relationships, including names that caught people off guard, like Cabot Phillips, someone connected to Charlie's own circle. That alone raised eyebrows. Then there was the image she projected publicly, someone very focused, very disciplined, very aligned with the values she spoke about. But at the same time,
5 major threats that make our grid extremely vulnerable that we've presented to congressional officials. 1 being cyber, 2 being hackers, 3 being physical threats.
There were clips online showing a completely different side. Moments of partying, social scenes, and behavior that didn't match the image people thought they knew. And that contrast, it had people talking nonstop. And what really pushed the speculation even further was the ongoing chatter about her alleged connections to the CIA. People kept bringing up that viral clip where she appeared in what looked like a promotional-style segment tied to the agency. It wasn't something people expected, especially given her background, and it made the whole situation feel even more confusing. At that point, the narrative didn't just feel like gossip anymore. It started to feel layered, complicated, and honestly hard to ignore. So when you put all of that together, it becomes a lot easier to understand why some people believe Charlie may have started feeling like the person he married wasn't exactly who he thought she was. And if he really began questioning everything he believed about her, that could explain why he allegedly felt overwhelmed, like he had stepped into something way more complicated than he ever expected. Then comes what many believe was the real breaking point, the reported confrontation between Charlie and Erika just 1 day before he passed. Because when people started looking closely at the timeline, the details from that night didn't exactly suggest a calm, normal situation. Instead, they pointed to tension that may have been building for a while. According to Erika's own account, Charlie chose to sleep in their toddler's room the night before leaving for his speaking engagement at UVU, the trip that would end up being his last. She explained it as him just wanting a good night's rest before an early morning, but to a lot of people watching from the outside, that explanation didn't fully add up. Because situations like that usually don't happen without something going on behind the scenes. And that detail alone had people asking questions. If comfort was the goal, why leave?
Kirk is an asset. That's why 2 Egyptian planes are following her every move from Egypt. She was Charlie Kirk's handler. If you don't know what a handler is somebody who works for the government and they're assigned to cases.
The main bedroom for a child's room in the first place? It didn't sit right with many people. But what happened the next morning made things feel even more off. Erika said Charlie didn't give her a hug or even a goodbye kiss before leaving. Instead, he briefly came into the room just to grab his neck chain and wedding ring, which he had taken off the night before, and then he left. That moment felt distant, cold, and completely out of character to many observers, and that's when the questions really started stacking up. Why take off the wedding ring in the first place? And why come back only to grab it without any kind of warmth or connection? To a lot of people, that didn't feel like a normal pre-trip moment at all. It felt more like the aftermath of a serious argument, the kind that leaves both people emotionally drained and disconnected. Then when Kanye spoke out, everything started clicking for some viewers. Details that once felt random suddenly started forming. A pattern. The separate rooms, the cold goodbye, the rumors of tension, it all began to look less like coincidence and more like pieces of a bigger situation unfolding behind closed doors. And once that perspective took hold, the conversation shifted fast. What started as speculation quickly turned into deeper suspicion among those following closely, especially when people began looking at what happened afterward. Because not long after Charlie passed, Erika stepped directly into his role, taking over as TPUSA CEO almost immediately. At the same time, she appeared publicly, speaking out and positioning herself at the center of everything. Some described it as a rapid transition that caught people off guard. And what added even more to the conversation was how confident and forward-moving she appeared during that period. To some, it didn't fully match what they expected from someone in that situation. Instead, it seemed like she was already focused on expanding her influence.
I will never forget the time I was in Israel with my husband, well, that was the second time, but the first time with my mother on a pilgrimage. And I was standing in the ticket line, and I remember looking behind me, and in the snake of the ticket line was a guy who looked very familiar. I had no idea who he was. And I told my mom, this guy looks so familiar, and as a typical mother, she said, go and say hi. No. We were late for our flight, and I'm not going to come off like a crazy person that's just weird. That ended up being Charlie.
Almost like she stepped into a new position overnight. That interpretation spread quickly. People began saying it felt like a sudden shift, from grieving partner to leadership figure without much pause. And when you combine that with Kanye's claims, it made the overall narrative feel completely different to those watching. Instead of a stable relationship disrupted by unexpected events, some started wondering if there had been deeper issues building all along. issues that only became visible once everything came to the surface. And then comes the part that really pushed things into another level of discussion, the idea that Erika may have had a more strategic role in Charlie's life. Because once Kanye spoke, a whole new wave of theories started circulating. Some began asking whether she could have been positioned in his life with a purpose, someone influencing things behind the scenes as his influence continued to grow. That idea gained attention quickly, especially among people already questioning the timeline and inconsistencies. Part of what keeps that theory alive is the confusion around how Erika and Charlie supposedly first met. Over time, she shared multiple versions of their origin story, and each one told things a little differently. In one version, Erika said that Tyler Bauer, who she described as a family friend, introduced them during the opening of Turning Point's head office. But with different versions floating around, it only added more uncertainty and kept people questioning what the real story actually is. And that's where things start getting even more complicated. Because the more people looked into those different origin stories, the more inconsistencies they felt like they were seeing. It wasn't just one clean version of how everything began, it was multiple versions, each one slightly different, each one raising new questions. And when stories don't fully match up, that alone is enough to keep people talking. In another version of how they met, Erika reportedly suggested that their connection wasn't just a casual introduction at an event, but something that developed more directly through shared circles and aligned interests. That might sound normal on the surface, but when you compare it to the other version, it creates a gap. And that gap is exactly what people keep focusing on. Because when timelines shift, even slightly, it makes people wonder what else might not be fully clear. And in situations like this, where emotions, influence, and public attention are all mixed together, even small details can start to feel much bigger than they are. Now add that to everything else that's already been discussed, the alleged tension.
I'm there thinking it's a business interview.
It started that way.
Right. So we sit down and you grill me for 3 hours? And he just sat there and he looked at me and he's like, you know what? I'm not going to hire you. And I was like, that's fine. I don't need this job. I'm doing plenty of other things here in Manhattan. He's like, I'm going to date you.
The distance people think they saw, the sudden changes after everything happened, and you start to understand why the conversation hasn't slowed down at all. It's not just one thing people are reacting to, it's the full picture, piece by piece, building into something that feels hard to ignore. And then there's the timing of everything, because timing plays a huge role in how people interpret situations like this. The closer people looked at when certain events happened, when certain statements were made, and when certain shifts took place, the more they felt like things weren't just random. Some started pointing out how quickly Erika seemed to step into a new level of visibility and authority. And again, that alone doesn't prove anything, but in the middle of everything else, it became another detail that people added to the growing list of questions. Because from the outside, it looked like there was very little pause between one chapter ending and another beginning. And that kind of transition naturally draws attention. People expect a slower process, a period of stepping back. But what they saw instead felt fast, structured, and very intentional. At the same time, supporters argue that stepping up quickly can also be seen as strength, that in moments of pressure, some people move forward instead of slowing down. And that perspective has also been part of the conversation. Not everyone sees it the same way, and that's what keeps the discussion divided. But regardless of which side people are on, one thing is clear: the level of attention on the situation hasn't dropped at all. In fact, it keeps growing. Every clip, every resurfaced moment, every old photo adds another layer to what people are trying to understand. And then there's Kanye's role in all of this, which continues to stand out. Because whether people agree with him or not, his connection to Charlie gives his words a different kind of weight. He's not just a random voice online. He's someone who, at one point, was actually in the same space, around the same people. And that's why what he said didn't just disappear after a day or two. It stuck. It kept circulating. Because people started asking themselves, if there's even a chance that Charlie confided in him, then how much of this could actually be based on real conversations? And once that question enters the conversation, it changes everything. Because now people aren't just reacting to rumors, they're trying to connect dots. And those dots keep leading back to the same core idea, that there may have been more going on behind the scenes than anyone realized at the time. Another thing that continues to fuel the discussion is how quickly narratives form when information is incomplete. When there are unanswered questions, people naturally try to fill in the gaps, and sometimes those gaps get filled with assumptions.
We had met through a family friend. He had invited me to the office opening
That spread faster than verified details. That's exactly what seems to be happening here, because without clear, consistent answers, every small detail starts to carry more weight than it normally would. A look, a moment, a timeline shift, suddenly it all matters. And the longer those questions stay unanswered, the stronger those narratives become, because silence, in situations like this, doesn't calm things down. It often does the opposite. It gives more space for interpretation, more room for speculation, and more reason for people to keep digging. Now take a step back and look at how all of this connects. You've got early whispers about tension, claims about inconsistencies, a timeline that raises eyebrows, a sudden shift in roles, and a high-profile figure like Kanye stepping in with statements that seem to align with what others have hinted at. Individually, each of those things might not seem like a big deal, but together, they create a narrative that feels layered, complex, and difficult for people to ignore. And that's why the conversation keeps evolving. It's not staying in one place. Every new detail, every resurfaced moment, every reaction pushes it forward. At the same time, it's important to remember that not everything being discussed has been confirmed. A lot of what's circulating is based on interpretation, on how people are reading the situation from the outside looking in. But that hasn't stopped the momentum at all. If anything, it's made people even more curious. Because when there's uncertainty, people pay closer attention. And right now, attention is exactly what this situation has. A lot of it. So as things continue to unfold, people are watching closely. Not just for new information, but for anything that might finally bring clarity to everything that's been building. Because at this point, it's no longer just about one moment or one claim. It's about the full picture, and whether that picture will ever fully come into focus. That version sounds way more casual, almost like everything just happened by chance, without any deeper setup behind it. But then another interview surfaced where she gave a completely different story, saying she first met Charlie while visiting Israel with her mother. And just like that, the narrative shifted again. Then it didn't stop there. In yet another version, she claimed their first meeting happened during what was supposed to be a job interview, that somehow turned into a date. And now you've got multiple versions of the same story floating around, each one slightly different, each one raising even more questions than answers. And once people started noticing those overlapping timelines, the confusion didn't just stay small, it grew fast. Because when origin stories don't fully match up, it naturally makes people wonder what the real version actually is. And that's exactly what's happening here. Now, instead of one clear story, there are several, and that alone has been enough to keep the speculation going strong. Because to many people watching, it starts to feel less like a simple, spontaneous connection, and more like something that might have had layers from the very beginning. And when you add Kanye's comments into the mix, everything gets amplified even more. Because now those differences in her story don't just seem like small inconsistencies, they start to feel like pieces of a bigger puzzle that people are trying to figure out in real time. So the question keeps coming back again and again. If the stories don't fully line up, and if Erika was already moving within those same circles before Charlie, was her presence in his life just a coincidence, or was there something more intentional behind it? And that's the part that keeps this entire situation alive. Because until there's a clear answer, that question isn't going anywhere. It just stays there, hanging over everything, keeping people watching, analyzing, and trying to connect every single detail. Now, I want to hear from you. What do you think about all these different versions of how they met? Do you believe it was all just coincidence? Or do you think there's more to the story that hasn't fully come out yet? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Make sure you like, subscribe, and share this with someone who's been following this situation too. And I'll catch you in the next one.